Alright, so say you watch some Vim video that briefly explains how it works. Maybe you have some keys down and you like the idea of all of your hotkeys being modal. Instead of having to press some whack-ass Control-Shift Windows Alt caps lock and then right Alt-Shift caps lock, whatever. Instead of many modifiers, all after the other, is just keys, and essentially commands being words. You like that idea, but then you come to the terminal, Vim, you look at it, and you're like, well, obviously not. You're not gonna use Vim in the terminal, because why would you? In my opinion, anyone who says that, oh, you can use Neovim in the terminal and make it as good as VS Code, if not better, they are lying. And if they're not, well, they're just out of their mind. It's an insane idea. However, you can absolutely make use of Vim or Neovim while still using your favorite editor. As you can see, currently my cursor is a block. That's not because I'm a weirdo, it's because I'm a Vim weirdo. I'm actually using Vim right now. Pretty much every editor, be it VS Code, Visual Studio, the JetBrains IDEs, and pretty sure more or less everything has a Vim extension that you can install and use Vim inside of that editor. So today I'm gonna show off 2 Vim extensions for VS Code. I got really interested in the idea of Vim, but I was like, well, nah, I'm not gonna use it in terminal. Fuck, I wish I could use that idea. Thanks to these extensions, I can. So, the first one is just called Vim. It's the one that most people use, in my opinion, because they don't know any better. I'll explain what that means in just a bit. So, it's the most popular one, you install it, and here you go, you can use Vim. However, it has a couple of issues. The biggest one is the fact that it's slow. In comparison to the other option. It's still gonna make you much faster at editing code, that's for sure. So you can absolutely use it. However, the implementation is a Vim layer that interacts fully within VS Code. So let me open a file that has multiple lines. So say I want to go 10 lines down, I press 10J. Well, in what I'm using, it's immediate, obviously. But in the Vim extension, or at least it worked that way for me, it would really fast, but still go down bit by bit. So instead of understanding where you want to end up and getting there, now it actually just repeated the down command 10 times. For me, it was a huge deal. Maybe it's not for you, completely up to you to decide, but it is something to consider. And this is just the most excruciating example of it being slow. But it's overall slow. Then, say you do some replacing with the S command, something to something. Well, in the Vim extension, it's just not going to work. Or maybe it will. Essentially, it's not consistent. So you'll just... Wait, that's not it. You'll continue using VS Code's replace, which, I mean, it's fine, but you're kinda backpedaling. It's basically kinda meh. So, okay, these are the 2 issues that came up in my mind immediately. Oh, also, a huge thing is the fact that, well, first of all, when I want to execute a command, here I have an input box. In the Vim extension, you can set up a hotkey. Basically, anytime that you press double colon, it will come up. That's not the default though. You have to set that up yourself. However, there's no way to make the same thing for the search. In what I'm using, you can. Okay, now that I'm done shitting on the Vim extension, I'll shill what I'm using. And it's Neovim. The Neovim extension. In my opinion, it's much better. However, both of these choices have their advantages and disadvantages. They are both valid. And they are both, in my opinion, a better way to edit code. Just ignore that. Yeah, essentially, pick either of them up and try it out, switch back and forth until you find what you like more. The issue with VS Code Neovim is the fact that, well, it's both an advantage and a disadvantage. How it works. It actually uses an instance of Neovim and runs it coexistent to VS Code. So when you give commands to VS Code, you actually pass them to the running Neovim instance. That's why when you make changes, they are instant. Instance. Anyway, making this extension much faster. How Vim is supposed to be to begin with. So that's very good. However, there is the fact that everything is edited in the Neovim instance. What I mean by that? So here I just made a selection with my mouse. I use code snap and yeah, it works. Okay, let's actually select this normally with the Vim method by pressing capital V. Do the same thing and it doesn't exist. What? Because the Vim selection and the VS Code selection are two separate things. So many things like that you'll have to fix yourself. Don't worry though, I'll teach you how to. So if you're interested in that, subscribe. And just to show off that I'm not lying, I fixed it. I just selected that line using Neovim by pressing $, and then it still worked. However, I needed to code that in. Not too difficult, but I had to figure that out. So don't worry. With me, you don't have to figure out as much. So that's a disadvantage. You'll have to make some things work. And also a disadvantage is the fact that you actually have to give the path to the Neovim executable. So I set up WSL, so Windows Subsystem for Linux. So I have the Z shell terminal, and in that, or in Linux overall, Vim is installed by default. And I installed Neovim there. So I could actually, let's search for this, Neovim path. Here it is. I could provide the path to the Neovim instance in my WSL Linux. So that's something you can do. It's very nice, honestly, that you can do that. But you don't have to. You can just install Neovim on Windows and give the path here, I think. Well, you figure it out. Just read through the settings of the extension. By the way, if you didn't know, you could do extension and then Neovim, and you'll see only the settings for the extension, so you don't have to guess. Alright, one thing that I want to mention, in both the Vim extension and the Neovim extension, you can provide a .vimrc. Well, in the Vim extension, a .vimrc, in Neovim, a init.vim file. Anyway, you can configure them almost and fully how you want. So for Neovim, you provide a path to the init.vim file. Why is it not the correct one? Why not to the Linux init.vim file? Because I actually experienced some instabilities with it. Sometimes it updates, sometimes it doesn't. So I make a change. So here I go here, n is my alias for the init.vim file in the actual path for Linux. I make some change, right? I save it, close the file, then reload VS Code, which is what you have to do to apply your changes, or in a more fashionable, I guess, way, you can reload, extensions. Yeah, you can restart extension host, and that will do the same thing, but faster and better. Hold on, I need to disable some setting. All right, I'm back. Am I recording? I am, perfect. So, the reason why I provide a Windows path is because it's more consistent. And then I have this weird thing that copies from this path, which is on Windows, then opens Neovim of that init file on Linux, and then copies it from Linux to Windows. So it's basically a sync. Reason why I'm not using a symlink or a hard link is because I don't think they work between Linux and Windows. So it's easier to do it this way. Anyway, try out just specifying a path to the Linux init file. That has worked for me for some time, until it didn't. I just wanted to mention this. Okay. That's more or less it on the settings in VS Code. Everything else you'll actually do in your init.vim file. Once again, if you're using Neovim. I'll mostly be covering this extension because that's what I use, and that's what I think is better. If you're using the Vim extension, you won't have to do as much because there are settings for many things. Okay. I guess, yeah, that's how you start. I recommend leaving this setting off because since there are two types of selections, the Neovim selection and the VS Code selection, you will usually have to, or rather, you will want to be able to make a VS Code selection with your mouse from time to time for things that don't really matter to make a hotkey for. So I recommend leaving that off. And it jumped. Of course it did. Why not? Yeah. Okay, that's about it for this video. In the next one, I'm going to teach you how to fix the code snap issue and many others, because the extension actually provides you a method to do that. in a very fashionable way. Well, to a point. It's not hard to do, it was just hard to figure out. So, with knowing how to do it, it's going to be easy for you. So, wait for the next video. Goodbye!